In this segment, we will explore the significant social challenges that accompanied the Industrial Revolution and the various philosophical responses seeking to address them. This was a global phenomenon, not limited to the United States, which led to the rise of three key ideologies: communism, social Darwinism, and positivism. Communism was first theorized in a book, the Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx and his collaborator, the factory owner Friedrich Engels. The central idea behind communism was essentially what I've presented in class. The problems of industrialization arose out of a shift in labor distribution and control of the means of production. Essentially, Marx and Engels theorized that as industrialization progressed, the means of production would become more expensive and out of reach for ordinary workers. This would leave only the wealthy capable of owning the means of production. Because of this ownership, the wealthy would reap the surplus value of labor, leaving the people who actually work on the means of production with only their labor to sell. The workers would then earn a subsistence wage, which is often not enough to live on. In some cases, it wasn't even enough to survive. This first part of the Communist Manifesto actually ends up being an accurate historical analysis of what happened in Western Europe. However, the rest of the manifesto's predictions fall short. Marx and Engels theorized that capitalism created a new oppressed class, the proletariat. Because capitalism requires constant growth and expansion to be successful, they argued, it would need more and more workers. This would lead to the oppressed class swelling in size until they spontaneously rose up and overthrew the owners, seizing their property. The transition of manufacturing control would then shift to the workers, who would own everything in common, eventually leading to a workers' paradise. So, the core idea of communism was that workers would become so miserable that they would violently overthrow the capitalist system and establish a society where, essentially, there's no government. Communists of this time believed the purpose of government was to enforce the rights of the wealthy. Therefore, with no wealthy class, there would be no rights to enforce, and people would govern themselves happily. As we'll see later, there are reasons why this doesn't work in practice. For now, we can focus on how the Communist Manifesto presented communism as a response to the excesses of the Industrial Revolution. Marx and Engels predicted that this revolution would lead to so much social unrest that the workers would eventually overthrow the bourgeoisie. Their prediction wasn't that communism might happen. It was that it would happen, and it was inevitable. When they wrote the manifesto in 1848, they thought the revolution would happen soon and that it would happen everywhere. It is fair to ask the question, when did the communist revolution happen? The answer is never. This worldwide revolution never occurred. So we're left with a theory that predicted a worldwide revolution that would happen immediately, but instead the revolution happened never and nowhere. That is a serious flaw in the argument, is it not? We'll discuss this more when we cover the 20th century, a period when the United States takes a strong anti-communist stance. Americans have generally been averse to communist and socialist solutions. Consider what happens to property in a communist system. While technically everybody owns everything in common, in practice, it eliminates traditional ideas of private property ownership. Communism promotes the idea that those who have more should voluntarily share with those who have less, ensuring everyone's needs are met. The problem with this, as many Americans saw it, is that the concept of sharing seems more appealing when you're the one who doesn't have something. If you have a car and I don't, I might think you should share it. But the reverse might not feel as generous. Historically, there's been a strong belief in the United States that even those without property have the opportunity to acquire it. This idea of America as a land of opportunity where anyone can get their big break through hard work is deeply ingrained. A Canadian scholar offered an interesting perspective on this. He argued that communism never took hold in the United States because America doesn't have poor people. We only have temporarily embarrassed millionaires. This suggests an enduring belief among Americans that they too will achieve wealth someday. This mindset makes the concept of sharing everything less appealing because even if I don't have much now, I might someday, and I likely won't want to share my newfound wealth. Americans are often characterized as materialistic. We like our possessions, we desire more, and we generally want to hold on to what we have. This contrasts sharply with the principles of communism. I want to clarify that there certainly were communists in America throughout history, but broadly speaking, communism never gained widespread popularity as a political or economic system in the United States. Next, we have social Darwinism. This ideology takes Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, the concept of survival of the fittest, and incorrectly applies it to societal structures. Industrialization brought radical change, with some individuals thriving while others faced significant hardship. Social Darwinists argued this was the natural order. Those unable to adapt would inevitably fail, ultimately strengthening society as a whole. This is, of course, a deeply flawed and harmful mindset. In practice, ignoring widespread suffering doesn't lead to societal improvement. Rather, it creates instability. Desperate people take drastic action, potentially leading to the very upheaval that Marx predicted. Americans weren't entirely receptive to this ideology. It conflicts with both the moral inclination to help those in need and the practical concern of the rising middle class. This new managerial and professional class had benefited from industrialization and sought to protect their gains. They recognized that ignoring societal problems could threaten everything. Finally, we consider a somewhat less familiar approach to addressing social problems, positivism. While you might not have heard the term explicitly, its core idea is something you intuitively understand. Positivism is a philosophical movement founded by Auguste Comte. Comte believed that societies, like scientific phenomena, could be studied and managed using scientific principles. His goal was to use this scientific management to guide societies towards modernization. Think industrialization, along with the political and cultural shifts that accompany it. Comte is also considered a founder of sociology, so if you've taken that class, you have him to thank, or perhaps not. In order to understand positivism, we are going to look at how it was implemented in Mexico. In the 19th century, Mexico experienced significant political and social upheaval. This culminated in the long presidency of Porfirio Diaz, who ruled for almost 40 years. Diaz believed that Mexico's history of conflict had hindered its progress towards modernization. Remember, during this period, nations had to modernize or be colonized. Mexico was vulnerable to economic exploitation by industrialized powers like the United States, Britain, and others. To avoid colonization and achieve progress, Diaz adopted a positivist approach. He believed modernization was necessary. However, he was wary of the social unrest that often accompanies rapid industrialization. His solution: appoint a group of advisors known as the científicos, or scientists, to manage the modernization process using scientific principles. The goal was to control and guide Mexico's development, allowing them to join the ranks of industrialized powers. As you might guess, things didn't quite go according to plan. We'll discuss the reasons why later, but it's important to note that experimentation with positivism occurred in man. It found its way into the United States, influencing the progressive movement, which also believed that science rather than pure capitalism could be harnessed to solve society's problems. Let's examine why the concept of scientists exclusively governing the United States, as theorized by pure positivism, presents a fundamental challenge. The process by which scientists attain their positions is through education and expertise, not democratic election. Consequently, if scientists alone become our leaders, our government ceases to be a democracy. Consider the traditional structure of city governments. Elected officials like mayors and city councils appoint department heads. These appointments often lacked requirements for relevant experience, creating potential for corruption and inefficiency. The progressive movement sought to address this. Progressives in California and across the nation advocated for keeping elected officials while placing trained, qualified professionals at the helm of departments. This approach prioritizes competence over political connections. However, this comes with a significant trade-off. While effective, it represents a departure from pure democracy. Once a qualified professional, like a police chief, is appointed, removal becomes exceedingly difficult. This dynamic conflicts with the fundamental American belief in the power of the people to choose their leaders. While American intellectuals observed the successes of positivism in contexts like Mexico, they recognized its inherently anti-democratic nature. This led to the emergence of progressivism, which draws inspiration from positivism but with two crucial distinctions. First, in contrast to Mexico, where positivism was imposed by the ruling elite, progressive reforms in America were frequently enacted through popular vote. Additionally, progressivism accepts a degree of compromise on pure democratic principles in favor of increased stability and efficiency. Once reforms are in place and professionals appointed, they are not easily undone. Ultimately, Americans rejected both communism and social Darwinism due to a paramount concern: the protection of property rights. Positivism, despite its challenges to democracy, offered a pathway to stability, a key factor in safeguarding property. This is a theme we will continue to explore. We will look at some of the progressive forms in the next lecture. Please proceed to answer the questions in the assignment on Canvas. If you have any questions, you can post them in the open forum discussion or contact the professor using Canvas email.